If you're interested in the story behind the business headlines, check out Big Technology Podcast, my weekly show that features in-depth interviews with CEOs, researchers, and reformers in business and technology. Hi, I'm Alex Kantrowitz. I'm a longtime journalist, CNBC contributor, and the host of the show. I empty my Rolodex every Wednesday to bring you awesome episodes, so go check out Big Technology Podcast. It's available on all podcast apps. Would love to have you as a listener.
From LinkedIn News, I'm Jessie Hempel, host of the Hello Monday podcast. Start your week with the Hello Monday podcast. We'll navigate career pivots. We'll learn where happiness fits in. Listen to Hello Monday with me, Jessie Hempel, on the LinkedIn Podcast Network or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to the American Negotiation Institute's podcast, where we will teach you the skills you need to get more out of life. And now your host, Kwame Christian.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Negotiation for Entrepreneurs. My name is Kwame Christian, and I'm a business lawyer, and I'm passionate about teaching business professionals like you how to negotiate and be more persuasive. So, I am super excited for this episode, just like I was last week for last week's episode, and we're going to continue our car negotiation series. So this series will give you some insight not only on how to negotiate for your car in particular, but it will also give you great insight on how to negotiate in general. So if this is your first time listening, welcome to the podcast. But before you continue listening, I'm going to need to advise you that you take some time and listen to the last episode, which is part 1 of this series. So these skills that we're teaching you are going to build on each other, so the material would probably make a little bit more sense if you listen to it in order. And before we jump into this episode, I want to remind you of the freebie that I introduced last week. So if you or a friend are going to be buying a car soon, I recommend that you spend the $0 necessary it takes to download this freebie. So if you go to the AmericanNegotiationInstitute.com/car, and so again, that's AmericanNegotiationInstitute.com/car, C-A-R, you'll get a free car negotiation worksheet that you can use to go through and make sure that you get the best deal possible. And so, who likes saving money? I like saving money. So if you go through this, you could save hundreds or maybe even thousands on your next car purchase. So I think that $0 is a pretty solid investment. Also, if you find this information helpful, please leave a review and subscribe. My goal for this podcast and the American Negotiation Institute in general is to teach these skills to as many people as possible. So leaving a review really helps our goal because it helps the search results, which helps us to reach more people. So by leaving a review, you're spreading the love. And now, the moment we have all been waiting for. Our interview with car enthusiast and negotiation expert, Kyle Racette. So Kyle and I go way back. He's one of my best friends from high school, and he has particularized knowledge in this field because his father owned a car dealership for well over 2 decades. In addition to this, Kyle has the opportunity to negotiate almost every day in his current role at a real estate development company. And, as fortune would have it, he just negotiated for a car last week, so this information is really fresh in his mind. So he gives us a play-by-play on how that negotiation went and what kind of tools and techniques he was able to use to get a better deal. He also offers some really great intel on what's going on in the mind of the salesperson, and getting that insight is going to be crucial for when it's your turn to have this negotiation. And before we jump into the interview, also want to say, before the interview started, he reminded me of a story of how he first got interested in negotiation. And what's really funny about it is that I'm in the story and I completely forgot about this situation. And it happened in high school, and I think it gives a really fun insight on the way I think and the way I approach business. So I'm going to put that little nugget at the very end of everything. So think of it like a hidden track. So when the whole episode is done, you could listen in and hear Kyle and I jump on the giggle bus and just laugh and think about times gone by. So yeah, but without further ado, let's just jump right into this interview. I am here with my good friend Kyle Racette. We have been friends, I don't want to say how many years, but since before high school, right?
Yep.
It's been a while, but so I'm excited to have him here because Kyle negotiates every day in his job, but he has a lot of industry knowledge when it comes to car dealerships because his father owned a dealership. So, Kyle, go ahead, give us a brief intro to you, and then we'll jump into the interview.
Thanks, Kwame. It's a privilege to be here today, and I'm just excited to get to share this time and share my experiences with you. So a little bit of history on me. Like Kwame said, I go way back. We went to high school together, grew up in the same town together. And then I ended up going on to get my degree in supply chain management. And a big thing about supply chain management is negotiations with suppliers. So in my career, I ended up, I worked for a company in Cleveland, and we are a large real estate development and management company. And my actual title is I'm a sourcing manager, and I'm responsible for the negotiation of material and service contracts for both new building construction and facility operations. So what are those kind of things? Just a couple examples are, like landscaping contracts. Every building needs landscaping. So somebody has to negotiate that for the property, and the property manager is not always the best person to do that. So what we do is we take our skills of negotiation and work with, large other corporate offices to try to negotiate contracts that are volume based on national leverage, and find, just other areas that can find value that a normal property manager wouldn't be looking for. There's other areas as well in new construction. You just look at, if we're building 10 buildings a year, we're going to try and put in some sort of agreement in place with a manufacturer. Maybe it's like things like appliances or paint or things of that nature where we're going to be buying a lot of it. So we'll put in volume incentives in a contract, rather than just on each specific project. That project manager, is only looking at their one job. So we bring a lot of volume focus and try to negotiate these large multi-million-dollar deals.
I love it.
With that said, this is obviously a special area of interest for me. I have a huge passion for cars. My dad was in the business for 49 years. I recently retired. And I just remember growing up, he always had a different car that he would drive home every night. And I would just be so into it, looking at it, wanting to know everything about it. And he would just always tell me his tips and tricks of the trade. And I actually always thought that I wanted to sell cars. But then, he explained to me that it's a hard business because you have people coming in every day wanting to negotiate. And he goes, it's actually a lot more fun to buy them than to sell them. So that's when it made me started thinking about, buying things. And, here I am 10 years later buying things. It's not cars, but it is something that I really do enjoy.
That's really interesting. So, and I think that breaks a common misconception of people where people think, oh, the car salesman loves this thing. It loves this negotiating thing. But I never would have thought that he would prefer to buy than sell.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, you look at cars and, it is the one industry that everyone looks at it as being super negotiation heavy. It just has that common stigma that it's the one thing you have to negotiate. When the reality is, I've heard it on your other podcast, you can negotiate anything. Every conversation you have is a negotiation, but there are so many tools out there to negotiate cars. There's tons of websites, to give you research, and they put their pricing right out on the website. And, the reality of it is, I mean, the two biggest purchases in your life is your house and your car. And your house is kind of stuck in a location. So they kind of have that advantage. Whereas a car, there's tens of thousands of that exact same car around the country. So you have many places to go. And there's a more defined market for it. And that's where all these tools come in place. So it's an area that people have just really focused on. And so the negotiation power has really changed from, over the years, the seller to the buyer, because we have so many tools. And that's, we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
That's interesting. And that goes into one of the key negotiation points when it comes to power and leverage, because knowledge is power, information is power. And before, it was only the car salesmen and the dealership that had the information. So you were kind of at their mercy. But now we can have endless amounts of information just at our fingertips.
Yeah. And like I said, my dad was in the business for 49 years. So the first, you could argue, 30 years before the internet came around, it was really hard. I remember him showing me a Kelley Blue Book. It used to be this little book. It wasn't an online tool that people could go to. So they didn't have any idea. He could look in a book and say, okay, if you bring in his car to trade it into him, he knows what the value should be based on mileage and the options. They printed it out every year and sent it to all the dealers. But, it wasn't readily, easily available to the everyday consumer, but now it is.
Hey you, I'm Andrew Seaman. Do you want a new job? Or do you want to move forward in your career? Well, you should listen to my weekly show called Get Hired with Andrew Seaman. We talk about it all, and it's waiting for you, yes you, wherever you get your podcasts.
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/marketer. Terms and conditions apply.
That changes the game.
Yeah, it really does.
Interesting. And what's perfect about this timing is the fact that you recently bought a car, right?
Yeah, I actually just bought a car 2 days ago, and it was my second car purchase in the past year. And the reality of it is I haven't had a whole lot of car purchases before that because I was buying them for my dad. So it was much less of a negotiation with him. He was already giving me the best deal possible. But the nice thing about these two recent negotiations is now I had him on my side and kind of being the person behind the curtain, giving me some ideas of how to take this negotiation to the next level and make sure that I got what I needed.
Nice. Was he actually in the room with you when you had these negotiations?
No, he wasn't. But I just had multiple conversations with him, and I think, one of the main things to focus on, Kwame, I know you talked about it in the Part 1 podcast, is the preparation. Mm-hmm. And that's really where I spent most of my time. I was, spending 45 minutes to an hour a day, weeks in advance, just talking to my dad, making sure I had all the questions I could, especially doing my research and going back to all the tools that are out there. I spent months and months and months of doing research before any car purchase. And I would say that the day of a person going into a dealership and just saying, hey, I want to buy a car, doesn't happen very often anymore. I mean, people should be doing their research and knowing what kind of car you want to buy. You have friends out there that have cars. You can go test drive their car and have an idea of what kind of car you want to buy. And then do research on it. You read the reviews on it. You read what the price is on it. You read what the warranty information is on those kind of cars. So I was doing all of that with my dad, but also learning kind of the inside knowledge of the industry. What kind of margins do they normally want to make on a car? But that can vary on dealership. What are the different ways they're going to try and, what tactics are they going to use, things like that. So it's very helpful to have somebody on my side like that.
What's really interesting about this is that a lot of people are going to be listening to this and they're going to say to themselves, wow, months in advance, hours, put into research, that's kind of extreme. I'm not going to do that. But when you think about the benefit on the other side and you kind of try and quantify that, it's well worth your time. Because when you negotiate, it's one of the few times in your life where if you were to give yourself an hourly rate, it would be hundreds and hundreds of dollars per hour, that you are earning by doing this preparation.
Yeah, and I don't think that, you're required to do months and months and months of research per se. I did because I enjoyed it, first off. I really liked reading up on each type of car to really decide, was this the car for me? If you kind of know like what the car is, you can find out what you want to know within several hours of research. But the excuse of not doing any research is not a good excuse at all. I mean, really, you could do it on your phone walking into the dealership and at least know what the fair purchase price on the car is.
Right.
So the amount of time you put in is as much as you want to, but I totally agree. I mean, you're just paying yourself with the more knowledge that you have.
Exactly. So tell us a little bit about the tactics that you employed, some of the strategy that you employed during the negotiation.
Yeah, so both negotiations that I had were a little bit different. I bought used cars, but I bought relatively low mileage used cars. That's kind of always been one focus of mine. But that's a little bit different market than a new car market. So a new car market, one of the tactics that you have to know is that every single new car has one price. So one dealer pays the same price as another dealer. It's just what they want to make and what they want to pay their salesman. It's a little bit different. Sometimes as well, they'll put some add-ins, like maybe they'll put some floor mats in or they'll tint the windows, things like that. And then they can charge whatever margin they want on that. So you should kind of have an idea, if that's an added on part of the car, what does that cost? Tinted windows might be $200 extra, but they're charging you $1,000 for it. That's a little ridiculous. So knowing that kind of information, but just knowing that, that car should cost the same at this dealership as the dealership across the street is power. And really, so what I would do, often is one practice I take is I find who's got the lowest price. I'm not going to go to the guy that's somewhere in the middle or on the high end. I'm going to find the guy that has the lowest price because that's the smallest hill to climb. If you go into a salesman and you're going to try to cut him $5,000, even if he's $5,000 over the price, that's a big number to him. It's a big margin to the dealership. And even if it's wrong, it's hard. But if it's already down and you're only trying to cut him a few $100s, it's much easier to swallow. They do that every day. So doing your research there and finding, one of the lower priced cars, but still in fair market value, is always a best practice and tactic of mine.
Okay, wow, that's really helpful. Because when I was thinking about what I was going to do with this one, I was going to go for the most expensive one and see how low down I can get him to see how big of a chunk I can get him down. But strategically, I should just go ahead and start with the lowest one because that would be the easiest place to start.
That's what I like to do, and it's been successful. It's because at the end of the day, I'm paying the lowest of the low then because I don't stop there. I'll go in, but the chunk that I'm trying to take out is much smaller, and they'll normally turn it much quicker. So, and again, that's just one area to focus on as well. There's many other areas that you can focus on when negotiating on a car.
Interesting. And let me ask you about these add-ons, because you said, so we have the base price for a new car that everybody pays. Then they would try and charge you more for those add-ons. How can we find the price, like essentially the fair market value of the add-ons?
Well, just simple things like I said, if it's floor mats, you can go on the internet. You could look if you wanted to buy floor mats yourself. You could even go, if it's a new car, you could go to maybe if it's Ford for say, you could go to the Ford's parts website and you could probably find what those floor mats actually cost to you and see if it's different than what they're putting in the car.
Oh, wow.
There's the reality of it is floor mats shouldn't cost you $1,000 unless they're made of gold.
Right.
So like they are going to mark them up, but maybe like a 10% markup is fair on that, not 500%. So just kind of focusing on those areas. They just like to try to slide those in as like, oh, it comes with floor mats and tinted windows and all this stuff, and that's why it's better. But is it really? I mean, should you really be paying that much more? I mean, those are the kind of things that they might try to do. But, again, there's just multiple areas of research that you can do. And it's, again, Googling it, simple as that.
Yeah. And that is a really great point that you made there, because you really need to consider the true value of what it is you're getting. And one thing to keep in mind when you're actually in a negotiation is determining whether it's information or if it's influence. So, for instance, if it's information, it's factual things that can be backed up by objective facts that could be researched. If it's influence, that's something that they're saying to influence you to believe to go their way. And that's a really great example that you gave, because essentially that's influence. It's like, tinted windows should not be that much.
Yes, definitely. A couple of other things that I wanted to point out, before I forgot, that my dad always taught me, is that the price of the car is not the only thing that you should be negotiating. There's other levers that you should be pulling. There's other expenses. One thing that people commonly do is they finance their car. And financing is also a way a dealership makes money. So when you're negotiating the purchase price of the car, well, if you're negotiating a price down and you're trying to get 2 or 3%, they might look at it and say, okay, 2 and 3%. We haven't even talked about financing yet. And they can make money on financing. So they might just make that money right back up on financing, and you have no idea. So because the banks incentivize them to use their, to finance through them. So they get a kickback from the bank. So you have to be aware of that. In this scenario that I just purchased, I knew that, obviously, because of what my dad told me. And I knew what banks I could get approved to. I already knew my credit score. And I also knew that I bought a Ford Fusion, was running a special. And it was like a 1.9% to finance. So that was I knew what it was. They weren't going to inflate it on me. So I was able to calculate out, okay, but if I get this price for the car and I get this financing, which I know I can because my dad told me that I'd be approved. But, if your credit score is good enough, they're normally going to approve you. Then I could figure out what my payment was going to be. And so then I was able to go in there and sit down with them. And, I negotiated the price of the car. They came out and they had everything laid out, itemized out. Here's your price. Here's your taxes. Here's your document fees, which are dealership fees that they charge for like just doing the paperwork. And then what the finance charges were. And then at the end, at the bottom, it showed the total price for the car. And then it showed the payment range. And the funny thing about this negotiation was the payment range did not add up to what I had pre-calculated it to be. And this is another area that even if you think, hey, like, I don't know how to do that, guess what? There's plenty of tools out there. You just Google car, what you should be paying. It'll tell you what you should be paying. But so I knew what my range should be. And what they were trying to tell me it was going to be was about $16 more a month. And so when I did the math, it was going to add up to a significant amount more for the price of the car, which was even way more than what I negotiated them down in the original price. So they were making it up on the back end. And I was like, no. Like, This isn't what it is. And so I just said, I don't know what's wrong in your calculations. So I just said, okay, I got out my phone. I started doing the math. And after about 2 minutes of silence while I'm doing it, salesman sitting there kind of awkward. He just got up, took the paper, walked back over, came back with the exact number it needed to be. And it was just like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's what I thought it should be. And I knew I had my number. And really what they were trying to do was just trying to slide it in somehow. And companies can do that sometimes. And then what they'll do at the end is they'll say, oh, well, this car has, some sort of special rust coating on it, so it won't rust. And it has this and this and this, and you have an extended warranty or something like that. And it's like, I didn't want to pay for that. And that's what they were trying to do, slide that in before I even knew it.
Wow. Okay. So let's take a second and tease all that out, because that is a lot of really, really good information. So when you're talking about the financing and how much more it can cost over time if the numbers aren't right. Slow down and break that down again, because I want to make sure that everybody gets that, because that's a really important point that you made. So when it comes to the monthly payments, like, what kind of things should we be looking out for? Like, how can we protect ourselves, like, actually in the negotiation with them?
Well, like I said, if you do the research beforehand, okay, and it should tell you based on, let's say you're doing a 60-month, which is pretty standard anymore. You do a 60-month loan on a car. They'll have different ranges of your interest, anywhere from 4 or 5%, and it could be higher depending on your credit score. If it's not very good, you might have a higher rate. And it can go all the way down. On a brand new car, you might even get 0%. So it might not be an issue. It's commonly on used cars, they'll have a little bit higher percentage. Mm-hmm. So, but you go right on a website, you tell them what you think your percentage should be, and it pops it all out. And it'll most of the time take into account taxes. It won't take into account document fees, but those are normally the only two additional costs that should be in there. So you should be able to get a pretty good number of what you think your car should cost you in terms of that rate. And just knowing that rate is what helped me, was knowing that, hey, let's just say the number's $400. Like, I knew I was going to be at $400 and they came back at $415. I'm like, it doesn't add up. Like, this math should come out to $400. But what they were doing again was they were taking some extra things they said they were putting on the car that I was like, hey, I'm not paying extra for those. And they were just going to say, hey, this is an extended warranty. That's going to be $10 additional. They didn't lay that out anywhere, but they were just sliding it in. And then what they do is later, when you're sitting down signing your paperwork, they're like, oh yeah, you have an additional 12 months warranty on this car. And you're kind of like, oh, that's great. That's cool. You didn't realize that you paid for it.
Wow. See, I'm blown away by this, because these are things that I wasn't aware of coming into this.
So again, like the real point behind it all is the price of the car is not the only negotiation point. You really have to focus. Now, if you're paying cash, that's one thing. You actually have a ton of leverage. They're super incentivized to sell to you because it's done. It's super easy. But you're paying or you're financing. That's a way they're kind of like, okay, I didn't get them on the price of the car. I'll make it up here. And in this scenario, they were actually trying to get more than what their car was actually going to cost me. So luckily I was able to catch it and end up signing that paper until they gave me the right number.
Yeah, and it just shows that you need to be vigilant throughout the process, because a lot of people might say, wow, I was able to negotiate $5,000 off. And then while they're busy high-fiving, the dealer is making that money back and more on the details.
Exactly. And so that's why everyone's still smiling at the end of it. And, you think you got a good deal, but they ended up getting even a better deal than you think. So knowing your payment, and really, focusing on you still have that financing to negotiate if you're not paying cash is super important. Real quick, another area to focus on is, if you're trading in a car, that's an area that you need to negotiate as well. And sometimes, realizing the fact that they're incentivized to buy your car a little bit higher because they want you to buy the other car. It's kind of like, hey, I'm not buying this car unless you take this car. So, those kind of things can be negotiated as well. And, they might try to hit you low on your trade-in because they're giving you too much on the other one. But the reality is, one thing that you could say is, I'm trading you this car and you can sell this car and I know you can make a margin on it. It's another area that you can research online, what your trade-in value is and what they can sell it for. Oh. So you know that delta on that car. So there's, hey, they have the possibility to make $2,000-$3,000 on my car. So I'm not going to let them make that on this car. But you sell that as, hey, I'm buying this car from you. You're getting another car in inventory that you can make another $2,000 or $3,000 on. So those kind of things, there's really three areas that I always focus on. This last time I didn't trade in a car, but I did in the past, is, the trade-in number, the finance number, and the actual purchase price are the three areas that are kind of key, but people always forget about everything but the purchase price.
Okay, so outside of these three things, because these obviously are the three biggest ones, the trade-in number, the finance number, and the purchase price. And just for the listeners out there, I'll make a freebie to go along with this, so you'll have the notes. So don't try and take notes while driving or anything like that. But what other things can we negotiate other than the purchase price and these other three things? Like what else is on the table?
Well, I mean, there's always those other things, like you can add in the extended warranties and negotiate that. they actually, after the fact that I negotiated out, they tried to bring it back and negotiate it back in. It wasn't something that I was interested in, but there is an area in there that you can negotiate. Or going back to what I was talking about earlier, maybe the car doesn't have floor mats and you want floor mats. Those are small things that, again, maybe that only costs them $250 that they can throw in. So those are definitely, small extra things that you could always look to try to add on. Oil changes, car washes from the dealership, lots of like services are always easy to negotiate into because they don't always think about the total cost of what those might be. They're just looking at making that deal get done.
Is there anything that we can give them that might incentivize them to lower the price at all?
Like I said, kind of with the trade-in conversation, using that as an opportunity, because Kwame, you did a good job last time talking about how the difference of the dealership's goals versus the salesman's goals. The salesman is always incentivized to sell multiple cars, and if they sell maybe 10 cars at the end of the month, they might get a better bonus on that. So they want to push the car to you. Now, the dealership does want to make a certain margin on it, but it's all about turning the inventory. The more cars they sell, the more customers they get, the more opportunities they have to make money. So, they don't want people walking out the door. And obviously, I think, Kwame, again, you did a good job talking about goodwill. You come in, you take that selfie with your new car and post it out on social media or something, and, just let everyone know, hey, come here. They're great to work with. You can do those kind of things. Those are always just good ways. Word of mouth is the best thing for dealerships. They always appreciate that.
Okay. That's good to know. That is good to know. So in this last deal with you, what kind of percentage were you able to get off in either of the ones, like the most recent one or the one before?
Well, I think the most successful in terms of percentage that I've done, this last one that I just did the other day was right at the bottom of fair market value, the cost of the car. So I was able to get another 1% to 2% off the price of the car. I knew my finance rate, so there wasn't much negotiating there. So it was pretty good. I ended up getting a really good deal on the car, where the car itself, compared to the standard market rate for that car, was 10% underneath standard what you would pay elsewhere. So I felt really good about that.
Okay.
Now, the other car that I bought, the big win was more so on my trade-in. They had a car, or it was actually a truck that I bought that had sat there for a long period of time, which is something I know you also talked in the last podcast. And they wanted to get rid of it. It was actually a funny thing. I bought it in Pittsburgh. It was a two-wheel drive truck. So when I called the guy, I said, hey, do you still have this truck? He said, yep. It's two-wheel drive, though. You know that? And right there, when he said that, I was like, wow, he's already got some sort of, like, this truck has a disease because it's two-wheel drive. What is that? So I knew that they were having a problem with it, because right away he was checking with me to make sure that I knew that. So, the ball was in my court. Now, the price on the truck, because it had been there so long, they had dropped a significant amount. It was actually 20% under market rate. And so I was pretty excited, and that's the reason why I was, considering it, driving all the way to Pittsburgh. But what I did tell them is, I had a trade-in, and I wanted to make sure that, I had to have that traded, or else this wasn't going to happen. And I ended up getting 20% over my trade-in's value.
Wow.
Just by, saying, hey, that has to happen. But they were so focused on getting rid of that truck and getting it out of their inventory that they were fine with paying 20% over. Now, it was a small, 20% is, relative to the price of the car, but, it was still 20% over the value, which was great. So I was super excited about that.
Wow. Okay. So these are some great nuggets. So out of those two scenarios, there are three things I want to highlight. So the first big thing is just kind of going back to what you were saying on not just focusing on the price, but focusing on the trade-in value and the financing offers too, because a lot of times we need to be realistic with what our goals are and be practical with what our goals are. Because like you said, if we just focus on the price, we might get knocked and not even know that we got knocked. So really being realistic with goal setting on each of these areas. So what's your goal with the overall price? What's your goal with the trade-in? And what's your goal with the financing? And making sure that the deal that you get is a great package overall.
Exactly. Yes, definitely.
And then another thing too, I really admire your listening skills in that, because as soon as he said two-wheel drive, is that okay? You knew that was a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So that was impressive. Can you give another example of when, like, what other tells a salesman or salesperson could have that could let you know there's a lot of wiggle room?
I think, anytime that that the car's been there for a while, there's a couple of ways you can know that. If you've been doing your research, you might have seen it sitting there for a while. The Carfax report is good. That's going to tell you how long they've had it. That's going to be a key right there. I mean, they are definitely, they're incentivized to get rid of cars as quick as possible. 45 days is kind of like they're going to start to try to dump that car, and because they are going to begin to lose money on it. And they want to free that spot up. That spot on their lot is an asset to them that's not producing any value. So they're sometimes, okay with getting rid of it. Buying a car at the end of the month is huge. And I would also add to that, buying it during the week. Their dealerships are always busy on the weekends, okay? So if your deal's not there, that's okay. Somebody else is walking in the door right now. So I always, both deals that I did, the other day it was Wednesday. I think the last time I bought the car on a Tuesday. Those are normally slower days. So they're looking for action. They're bored. They want to get something done to feel good about their day. I mean, those are all like psychological things, that we all have. You want to feel progress in the day. So when you target kind of days like that, it's normally a good thing too.
I saw online that buying on a rainy day kind of has a similar effect too. Have you seen that?
Oh, definitely. Oh, for sure. My dad used to tell me all the time, I would call him and he would just, he's like, oh, the weather's terrible here, so it's super slow. I mean, no one wants to be out, walking around a car lot looking at cars when it's raining. But when it's beautiful out, people are in a better mood too. They like being outside. They don't mind looking at cars. All that stuff is definitely plays an effect. Even the winter and the summer, summer's definitely a hotter season to sell cars than the winter. So if you can buy in the winter, it's slower. So, but you do have to kind of deal with the effects of that too.
Yeah. This is brilliant. This is just brilliant stuff, man. And what's really cool about this for me is that it's an area, like I said, that I'm not familiar with. I have general knowledge, just layman's knowledge, but you have that expert level knowledge. And so a lot of times in negotiation, I can take my generalized negotiation knowledge on the principles and apply it and do well. But when you mix that with expert level knowledge, it takes it to a new level. And so that's why it's important sometimes to take the time to do your own research, but also tap into the experiences of other people and lean on them when you have the opportunity, so you can be even better prepared for your own negotiations.
Yeah, and I would, it's drilling into the example that, you're providing about experience, expert level experience. I'm going to leave you, with one really good nugget, a car negotiation. You'll realize that I didn't talk about test drives at all.
Oh. And
there's a reason to that. Neither car that I bought did I test drive before I had the price negotiated.
Really?
Much like buying a house, you don't go into a house you can't afford. The realtors will try to do that all the time, but a realtor is incentivized by how much the house sells for, obviously. Same with a car. They're going to make more in a car that you can't afford, and they're going to try to show you cars. So, like I said, doing research beforehand, I test drove cars of friends, people that I trusted, talked to them about their car. The truck that I bought, one of my good friends had the exact same truck, so I was very comfortable with everything about it. I didn't need to test drive it beforehand. It wasn't until after the price was negotiated that I got in the car, made sure that it was what they said it was. It didn't have any defects. I fit the car well. Everything worked the way it was supposed to. Because what happens is a salesman uses that as a tactic to make you emotionally involved in the car. They want you to see all the cool things that it does. And it's obviously better than the car you have, or else you wouldn't be buying it. So
Right.
you're in love with the car, and now they know that they have a little bit of that with you. So yeah, just that experience of friends, expert level experience of somebody else who has the car. They're an expert in that car. So talk to them about it, test drive their car first, and then go in, talk about the price, then drive the car.
That's great advice. And it kind of goes back to information versus influence. Like, are you really learning anything new per se from the test drive? Not really, but you're starting to fall in love.
Well, and again, test drive is an ancient practice. It was what they did before we had the internet to get you to know the car. They didn't have car commercials like they do now, and they just didn't know that much about a car then. So it's just too much information anymore. So the industry is changing, but the way they sell cars hasn't.
So while you were in the room with the guy, how long was the actual negotiation, the back and forth? How long did that take?
Actually, the back and forth in both my negotiations, remember, because I had a small hill to climb was a focus of mine. It was really probably only 45 minutes or so. After that, it's just paperwork time, things of that nature. And they're just taking time to file stuff, but that's not that long of a period of time, in my opinion.
Okay. Especially and one of the reasons I asked is because when you look at that relative to the amount of time you took to prepare, it's the competition is the easiest thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. You know what it is, Kwame, when you have the knowledge, you have the upper hand. Mm-hmm. And I think you said competence is confidence. Mm-hmm. And that's the truth. I mean, I knew what my payment was. So it was relatively quick that when they did put the numbers in front of me, I knew it was wrong. And it only took, so I said it was 45 minutes. That was the whole process of them putting the numbers together. When they put it in front of me, I knew it was wrong. Like I said, it took 2 minutes for that guy to realize that I wasn't buying it and that I knew my number of what it should cost and this was wrong. So when they came back with the right number, I was fine with it because I had already said, this is the number I know and I'm okay with paying it.
Right. I want to go back to that too. I'm glad you brought that back up. Mm-hmm. You said when you said the number looks weird and then you started to go do your own calculations and it was just awkward silence for a while. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about the value of silence when it comes to negotiations?
Oh, it's like my favorite. It really is because, people don't like awkwardness. They hate that. And I didn't even say anything. I literally said nothing. But just well-placed silence makes people uncomfortable. We live in a day where we're constantly have to be, entertained in some way. And this guy was just sitting there waiting for me. And he didn't know what to do. And he, I think, saw, like, he's going to figure something out. So I better just go try and make this right. Or I might just get up and walk away. So I literally just said, this isn't right. I'm going to do my calculations, started doing it. And after 2 minutes, without me saying anything, he got up and went back. But yeah, silence is super powerful. People do not like it. But when you're the one that creates the silence, it's a huge, huge strength and can play to your favor very well.
So it's funny. This actually reminds me of something. A couple of years ago, I was listening to a news story, and it was a journalist being interviewed talking about journalism. And she said that, sometimes when you just ask a question and then you stay silent and they give an answer and you just maintain that silence, you would be shocked at what people will fill that silence with. Just the most incriminating things, because they just keep going on. And essentially, the guy that you were talking to didn't fill the silence with words. He filled it with actions. And his actions were saying, I misled you. Here's the truth.
Yeah. And it was actually a really great feeling when he walked away. I was like, wow. Like, actually thinking like, hey, that, they're scared, like they knew that I knew. And yeah, it was definitely a win. And I do that commonly in my day-to-day work. It's you just let the other people talk. Let them talk. Let them give you more information than you're giving them, and you're on a path to success.
All right. What are some things that you would say to avoid in this particular type of negotiation?
Speaking specific to cars, I think the one thing I said earlier is test drives. I'm not saying don't test drive cars, but if it's a car that you want to buy and you know you want to buy, maybe test drive a different car at a different dealership, or try to find a friend, because like I said, you're going to get emotionally involved in that car, and it's going to give them an upper hand that you don't need to give them. I would say another thing to avoid is, laying your cards on the table and letting them know what you're willing to pay. That's never a good thing. Once you put that number out, they'll find any way to hit that number. Sometimes they're going to try to sell you a car that's not worth that price. So, you got to hold that in as long as you possibly can. And then the last thing, getting emotionally involved in general in any negotiation is never a good thing. And if you find yourself getting there, it's better to just walk away, because once you're emotionally involved, whether it's you're angry about the situation because it's not going your way, or you're, just so in love with whatever you're trying to buy that it's making you pay more, you're going to walk out and a couple of days later and you're going to regret that.
Right.
And especially in cars, like I said, it's like the one area that it's common to negotiate. Like, even if you screw up one deal or it's not going the way you want, you can go to a dealership down the street. It's not that much further to drive that's going to have a similar car or even the same car, and you can start all over. So it's one of the easiest things to walk away from.
I really like that last point, because the walk away is something that is really underutilized when it comes to these types of negotiations, because you feel invested for some reason. You feel really tied to this car that you've never seen before, and that has millions of identical siblings,
Yeah, so. Exactly. And, there's so many other opportunities. And like, that's how I said it's different than a house. If there's a house on a beach and it's the best beach location, that's one thing. You know what I mean? It's all about the location there more so than the house.
Right.
But this thing, there's an assembly line cranking these things out one after the other. So there's just there's no need to, if you're not getting what you want, to just walk away.
Yep.
And it's one of the best tactics, because every general manager will tell you they do not want you to walk out that door, and they're going to just start lowering the price once you walk out the door. They're going to try to do everything they can to keep you from getting back in your old car.
So let me ask you this. When you said hold the cards as close to your chest as possible when it comes to your numbers, and I agree with that. But let's say I'm a salesperson and I'm my goal really is to figure out what your number is. And so how do we avoid those questions? How do we dodge those?
That's a good question. I don't know that there's a way to dodge it other than just being upfront about it. Sometimes I would say, we're not even talking about numbers yet. We have other things we need to figure out. Or the best thing is honesty is the best policy, and just say, I don't feel comfortable talking about numbers yet, and just saying I came here, I want to know what your best price is, and just make them give it to you. You don't have to give them anything. They want to sell you a car. That's what their livelihood is. That's their job. That's all they do. If you don't walk out with a car at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world. But to them, that's a failure in their life in that day.
And what's interesting too about the numbers, you almost feel obligated when somebody asks a question, you can't help but answer it in your own head, at least, but you keep it in your head. That's the goal, to keep it in the head. But you feel obligated because somebody asks you a question to answer it, but it's not the case. It's kind of like a fake social pressure that we feel to respond. And remember, we don't owe them any information. And when you think about it logically, if we're trying to figure out what the lowest is that they can go, what does it matter how much I could pay? So exactly. If I'm buying a Ford Fusion like you bought, if I have $1 million budget, is that somehow going to become $1 million Fusion?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a super, super good point in terms of it's not what I'm willing to pay, it's what you're willing to sell it to me for.
Right.
And that's a good way to say it too. I know that I've heard since then, my dad has bought a car as well. And he was telling me the story, and he's like, it's just so funny because I feel bad for the people that have to deal with him because he's even like, I know that you can do this type thing. And, like, I know you can cut this down to that price. I know what the price should be. And, you're not making that much on me. And it's funny, but that's the reality of it is he's very good at, no, it doesn't matter what I can pay. It matters what you can sell me this car for.
Yeah.
And they're going to find out what you're approved for later, but it's normally you can be approved for way more than what the car that you're buying for is anyways.
Okay. Man, these are great tidbits. It's funny, man. I like, now that I know this, I just want to go out and just buy a car. I can't. My CFO, Whitney, my wife, she would crucify me.
Yeah.
But
you don't know. You might use this tactics and get such a great deal that you just, maybe she'll kiss you afterwards.
Maybe if I manage to buy a $5 Lambo, that'll be worth it. Well, good stuff. Yeah. Okay. Let me ask you this. This will be the last question. So, what is one thing that you would challenge our audience to do, even if it's not related to a car negotiation, but just in general, to become a better negotiator?
I think that the best way to go is just to spend some time researching whatever it is. That time you spend in varies on how the importance it is to you. But when it's something like a home or a car, there's just too many tools out there to not utilize. And just knowing what you want to buy, knowing your budgets. So too many people don't take advantage of that. And like you could Google a lot of the things and find podcasts like this amazing American Negotiation Institute to figure out how to buy a car. There are ways, there's tools. There's too much out there to not take advantage of before you go into this. And it's easy to be prepared, actually.
Man, that's great. That is great. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. This has been really, really helpful.
No problem. It was a pleasure. I'm excited. I got to talk about something that I'm passionate about doing and a subject I'm passionate about in cars. So glad I could be a part of it. And thank you very much.
So I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. And again, a big thanks to Kyle for helping out. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a review and let us know. That really means a lot to us, and it helps our ratings and searchability go up so we can reach more people. So if you like what you heard, leave us a review. Also, before you go, remember, take advantage of that freebie, the car negotiation worksheet. So that'll help you walk through your own car negotiations. So if you go to americannegotiationinstitute.com/car, you can get it there. If you want to learn more about what I do here with the American Negotiation Institute as far as consulting and coaching and speaking engagements, just check out the website there or connect with me on LinkedIn. And if you live in Ohio, my law firm operates in Ohio. That's where I'm barred. So give me a shout if you need any business law help. And as promised, I'm going to put in that little clip with that back and forth with me and Kyle. So if you want to get into the mind of Kwame Christian and see the way I think, this will be a good insight. So just a little background. We were in this business class and our teacher's name was Mrs. Reeser. So with this particular exercise, our goal was to create a company and see how big we could grow it. So I'll just leave it at that and let Kyle finish up the story.
I think it's funny because every time I think about negotiations, I think about like one of the first projects I'll tell people about that I was ever involved in that had negotiations related was the project that Mrs. Reeser made us do, where it was like real estate and you just dominated the class. And I'm like, that was one of the first negotiations. And I think the negotiation was between you and me. And it was pretty much, I'm going to take your business and I'm just going to run the class. And I was down with that, you remember? And it was just like, I became your vice president. And it was just like one by one, there was no choice for anybody else but to just give it up. And I was like, now that was kind of like more of a monopoly type thing, but it was still like the idea of it. It's hilarious that's how it started.
Dude, that's so funny. You know what's funniest about that? Is that I completely forgot about that. Like until you brought that up, I'd never thought about that since high school. That's crazy. I do remember that now.
It was like probably the first project that I ever had that had some sort of negotiation. And that's when I remember, like, it was kind of like I was just trying to be lazy and just, you were so competitive, so it was an easy win for both of us.
Right.
But the idea is, like, that's how things are done in the real world. I mean, people do that kind of stuff all the time. And then, I always knew that I wanted to go that route. So here I am.
I do remember that. We beasted that class.
Yeah. And it was like we were the juniors and the seniors got so mad and then they try to do the same concept. And we're like, our corporation is way bigger than you can ever. We already had half the class. There was no way they could beat us. And I remember it was a competition for, like, just buying things up or whatever. You had to negotiate, and it was just like let's just make this quick. Let's just make you big so no one can compete. And
oh man,
we got an A. I know we got an A.
We had to. So I hope you enjoyed that clip as much as Kyle and I obviously did. Keep your eye out for part 3, where I actually do the recorded negotiation. So we'll see how good of a deal we can get. So thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.